Wait. Perfect. Okay, well, hello and welcome everyone. Good afternoon. My name is Natalie Pritchitko and I'm the proud CEO of the Whitby Chamber of Commerce. Welcome to our post-federal budget event with our guests MP Ryan Turnbull and the Honorable Mona Fortier, Associate Minister of Finance and Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. Whew, that's a long title. Thank you all for joining us today. The event is in a Q&A format. Our advocacy committee actively meets with MP Turnbull, and we're happy to attend events he hosts like roundtables for small business. And for the federal budget, we actively submitted our POV and then attended a pre-budget consultation. So I just wanted to give a shout out to our advocacy committee. Last year in particular has been extremely challenging to these volunteers, and their ongoing efforts in representing the business community are very much appreciated. So I'd like now to invite MP Ryan Turnbull to provide some opening remarks and introduce Minister Fortier. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Natalie, and good afternoon, everyone. I'm joining you from my home in Whitby, which is on the traditional territory of the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, which is covered by the Williams Treaty. And I'm delighted to be joined by the Honorable Mona Fortier, the Associate Minister of Finance and Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. And I want to thank the Minister for joining us today. Also want to thank you, Natalie, and give a big shout out to the whole team at the Whitby Chamber for your advocacy and for the entire business community that I know you always support and give voice to and keep the lines of communication open at all times with me and my staff team. And I really appreciate that and really appreciate all of the hard work that you've put in over the course of this pandemic to relay the many thoughts, concerns, ideas, suggestions from our business community that's so important. Leading up to the budget, my team and I had extensive local consultations, including over 8 stakeholder meetings, and received over 150 submissions from Whitby residents through my website. And I'm delighted to see some of those ideas reflected in Budget 2021. Budget 2021 is, in my view, a historic budget, one that will help us finish the fight against COVID-19 and help set us on the path to a strong economic recovery, which I know we all are patiently awaiting or impatiently awaiting, perhaps. I'm glad to be a part of this conversation today, and I will turn it over to the Honorable Mona Fortier, the Minister of Middle Class Prosperity. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Bonjour tout le monde. Thank you, Nathalie and Ryan, for the incredibly warm welcome. And it's great to be able to speak to you at the Whitby Chamber of Commerce. Virtually, of course, maybe soon I will be able to visit you in person. Alors, vraiment, c'est un grand plaisir d'être ici avec vous. And before I continue, I would like to acknowledge that I am joining you today from Ottawa, which is on Algonquin and Anishinaabe traditional territory. And Nathalie, I want to tell you again, a big shout out, like Ryan just did, for the hard work, and also your advocacy committee for working so hard and sharing with us your submission and sharing with us how we get to work together. I think that is something that was really important in the last year, and that collaboration should and will continue, I'm sure. And I also want to give Ryan a shout out before I dive into the budget. You know, he's one of the hardest working members of Parliament, and he's tirelessly advocating for the needs of the community here in Whitby. And he was very involved in pre-budget consultations and ensuring the local ideas from people and businesses in Whitby were heard. And I hope you will see some of your suggestions and ideas reflected in the budget. And also, as he is the founder and chair of the Social Innovation Caucus, he also advocated for some very important budget items like the $775 million allocated for the Social Finance Fund. That will help and ensure our most vulnerable can access much needed services. So thank you again, Ryan, for being here today and also advocating with me for your community. So this is it. This is the big book. As you saw on April 19th, our government announced Budget 2021. And if you haven't been able to read through all the 700 pages and the 270 measures, I am very glad I get a chance to brief you all today on this plan for growth and resilience. And trust me, we do have a lot to talk about. Now, this is a very ambitious plan, a significant one, and like Ryan said, a historic one. And it focuses on two main pieces. First one, finishing the fight against COVID, and the second, laying the groundwork for a strong economic recovery. Now, let me start with the former. As you know, from the beginning, we have made it clear that our first priority is to fight the pandemic and save lives. The largest vaccination campaign in our nation's history is now underway, and by the end of September, every Canadian who wants one will have access to a vaccine. And as of yesterday, Ontario has administered more than 7.7 million doses, which is very good news, and we must keep the momentum going, of course. And to help accelerate this work, we have invested in an additional $1 billion to help speed up vaccinations, and another $4 billion for healthcare systems. And I know how important this investment will be for Ontario as we fight our current surging third wave. Now, while we focus on the health of our people, we are also focusing on the health of our business community, in particular, small businesses. Through this plan, we will make targeted investments so businesses can hire and train Canadian workers with a focus on getting more people in the economy in a fair and inclusive way. Over 500,000 people will benefit from these initiatives. Now, for example, small businesses, especially those here in Whitby, will appreciate our commitment to invest $4 billion to support 160,000 small and medium businesses to enter the digital economy. And that's not just to bring retail stores online, although most of it is part of it. It is funding that will also help businesses automate with artificial intelligence, protect their intellectual property, and become more competitive in the labor market. Now, for businesses that have been hit hardest by the pandemic, you know who they are, our beloved restaurants, tourism operators, arts and culture. Hiring the workers they need to grow is a cost they may worry about taking on. And that is why the wage subsidy has been a lifeline and so critical for many. It has helped more than 5.3 million Canadians keep their jobs, and the rent subsidy and lockdown support have helped more than 154,000 organizations with rent, mortgage, and other expenses. And we will continue to be there for businesses as long as they need, and we have extended those supports until the end of September. We are also introducing the new Canada Recovery Hiring Program to help offset a portion of the extra costs employers take on as they reopen, either by increasing wages or hours worked, or by hiring more staff. And our goal is to make it as easy as possible for businesses to hire new workers and get Canadians back to work. Mais comme vous le savez, les femmes ont été très touchées par cette pandémie et leurs emplois continuent de se rétablir plus lentement. Aujourd'hui, plus de 16 000 femmes ont complètement quitté le marché du travail, tandis que plus de 91 000 hommes l'ont réintégré. C'est un problème et c'est une récession féminine. Now, what I've been saying is that we have a she session, and one of the biggest solutions to that challenge is childcare. COVID has made it clear that childcare is not only a social issue, but also an urgent economic issue. School and childcare closures have been very difficult for parents. Without access to childcare, parents, usually mothers, cannot fully participate at work. And some have had to leave their jobs or even reduce their hours significantly. The Canada-wide early learning and childcare is the national economic policy we need now. Now, the benefits are threefold. It provides jobs for workers, the majority of whom are women. It enables parents to reach their full economic potential, and it creates a generation of engaged and well-prepared young learners. And as someone who literally had to start their own daycare in my basement because I had no other options as an entrepreneur and small business owner, I can tell you how transformative this will be for so many people. Now, here are the details. Budget 2021 commits to up to $30 billion over 5 years to build a high quality, affordable, and accessible early learning and childcare system across Canada. Our short-term goal is to cut the fees by half by next year and reach a $10 per day childcare system by 2026. That's 5 years from now. This investment will increase the size of our workforce by an additional 240,000 workers. Et j'ai visité virtuellement Windsor en avril et j'ai entendu la communauté locale dire à quel point ce programme sera transformateur, non seulement pour les familles, mais aussi pour l'économie dans son ensemble. For example, Shelley Fellows from Automate Canada said that we are offering a solution to bring down a substantial barrier to women in the manufacturing sectors. She said that as our economy opens back up, manufacturing will ramp up as well. And Automate Canada will be hiring. And it is amazing to think that now the hiring pool has just doubled in size. Beyond supports for small business and working parents, the budget also makes serious investments in affordable housing, communities, infrastructure, and our environment. And I know, of course, our time is short today, so I will highlight just a few of these measures. $2.5 billion to address urgent housing needs, including a $1.5 billion for the Rapid Housing Initiative, which will create at least 4,500 new affordable housing units across the country. $26 billion for infrastructure projects that will keep our economy going, including a permanent public transit fund and other projects like roads and community centers. And $7.6 billion towards a green recovery to create jobs, build a clean economy, and fight and protect against climate change. Now, as you can tell, this is a highly ambitious budget, significant one, and it's designed to help as many people as we possibly can stay healthy, safe, and employed. And Christia Freeland and I approached this historic opportunity with a focus on benefiting as many people as possible while they navigate this tricky time and come back way better on the other side. There's so many more measures I could share with you, but at this time, I will conclude by saying that this budget is a demonstration that our government will continue to stand together with Canadians during this challenging time. My last message is that we have your back. Thank you very much. Merci. And I think, Nathalie, you will be managing or entertaining the question period. So I will let you take it on. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you. I think you highlighted some of the spending, obviously, but the question about the budget is specific to what would be on the minds of a lot of people, and the fact that the budget proposes $101.4 billion in new spending. So is this really a budget that Canada can afford?
Well, it's a very important question. And yes, people have been asking this question. And I want to be very clear in my response. Yes, we can afford it. And we must make these investments now. First, to get through this pandemic. And second, to prepare for a better future. Now, the International Monetary Fund has been very clear that without federal government intervention and support, our GDP would have declined and unemployment would be much higher. And they also say that investments must continue because we are still not out of the woods yet. Now, take the 2008 global recession, for example. The countries that withdrew their support too quickly experienced very slow growth. Canada will follow the advice of the OECD and the IMF, which have urged governments to maintain support over the recovery phase. And as you know, we are committed to helping Canadians get to that other side of the pandemic while making the necessary investments today to ensure that we come out of this way better and stronger than before. And I also want to add, in case you're not aware, that we as a federal government do not make the forecasts and growth projections that the budget uses. The Department of Finance polls private sector economists to ensure that our numbers are careful and objective. And Canadians are cautious and prudent with their money, and they expect their government to be as well. And that is why this budget 2021, is an ambitious plan to invest in jobs and growth, but it needs to be careful. It is prudent, it is responsible, and it is well within our fiscal capacity. So I hope that answers your question, Nathalie.
It does, thank you. So as you mentioned, we are in the middle of our third wave, and Ontario is battling concerns around variants and healthcare capacity. So I know your government is working hard to roll out vaccines. We just touched on them actually as we waited for the event to start. But at the same time, our businesses are locked down and many are struggling to survive. Can you tell us how your government is working to support families and businesses during this challenging time?
Another very important question, and I completely understand and know how hard your region has been hit by the pandemic. And as you know, the government's broad suite of support measures has helped families, protected jobs, supported business across Whitby and Canada. And more than 8 of every $10 spent to fight COVID-19 and support Canadians continues to come from the federal government. And we're making important targeted investments in our healthcare system to ensure that it has the resources it needs today so that our people are protected and safe. And as I mentioned earlier, $4 billion to provinces and territories to immediately help healthcare systems. We also are speeding up vaccination rollout with another $1 billion to provinces and territories. And we haven't talked about mental health yet, but I have to tell you, we're putting $1 billion to help support the mental health and well-being of people affected by COVID-19, including, of course, veterans, Indigenous peoples. And I know many business owners have been going through hard times. So this is going to support Canadians. And also, I want to say that in the face of COVID-19 pandemic, our government acted swiftly to provide support to Canadians and support people, businesses, and we adapted our response as the pandemic evolved. And I'm going to give you the example of wage subsidy. When we first introduced our idea of 10% for wage subsidy, I think every Chamber of Commerce reacted and said it's not the right approach. And we listened. How did we listen? We changed and we said, okay, we're going to look at what's being done across the world, what we should be doing. And that's when we offered our first 75% support with that 30% threshold that we had brought forward. And that worked for a couple of months, but then we were told, no, can you scale it? And we changed it again. And we adapted by listening to businesses, working with them, and making sure wage subsidy was a solution to protect jobs and help the businesses go through the very difficult phase. And again, we listened during the budget pre-consultation. Why? Because we were told we have to continue this support of wage subsidy after we start working on the recovery. So as you know, these wage subsidy will go until September. And that is an example of how we adapted our response during the pandemic. And we have a plan to bridge Canadians and Canadian businesses through the crisis and towards a robust recovery, which I think and I feel confident we will be starting very soon. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, and in fact, I think we'll get to the sort of the wage subsidy and other supports in another few questions. So thank you. And you'd mentioned the understanding that it's been a very challenging year for small businesses, yet particularly in this region, they're the backbone of our economy and we'd like them to survive. So the government's COVID financial support programs have helped some of our business community to ensure they've lived through the pandemic, but can you tell us more about specifically what the government's doing to support small business? So again, we've mentioned the third lockdown, but You touched on the wage subsidy being available until September. Will any other financial support be lengthened, or is it in the plans?
Well, that's again, I think I will continue the answer as you were mentioning. I mean, the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy, I said earlier, helped more than 5.3 million Canadians keep their jobs. And the other one we were talking about was the Canada Emergency Rent Subsidy and the lockdown support. And that has helped 154,000 organizations with rent, mortgage, and other expenses. And there's also CEBA, as you know, the Canada Emergency Business Account, which was another very important program, and that is extended till June. So the other thing I would like to share is that in order to bridge Canadians through the rest of this crisis to recovery, we have to continue this support and to give workers and employees certainty and stability over the coming months. We are extending the wage subsidy, as I said earlier, but also the rent subsidy and the lockdown support until the end of September. And if ever, I don't want it that way, but if ever the pandemic take a turn for the worst, we have given ourselves enough flexibility in the budget to extend those supports further beyond September if needed. And we will not hesitate to do so, but at this time, we have that card in our back pocket. And I also want to mention that we are also proposing to expand the Canada Workers Benefit to support about 1 million additional low-wage jobs, helping them return to work. And also there are many new or enhanced programs that will be available to businesses, including the Canada Digital Adoption Program, which I mentioned earlier. And it will also create thousands of jobs for young Canadians and help as many as 160,000 small and business-sized businesses and enhance to the Canada Small Business Financing Program. There's also funding to help Canadians develop and improve their skills. That was something I believe you shared in your submission, access to training programs and the transition to new industry. And these supports are estimated to connect 130,000 Canadians with new work opportunities. So this is all included in the plan that we're proposing to really help small businesses move forward into recovery.
Thank you. Earlier, you mentioned the quality of life framework, and because really in the past year, what has been clear to us that Canada's well-being is much more than just our GDP. So you'd mentioned mental health as an example and resources, and having access to food as an example. Could you elaborate on this approach a little and the impact specifically it would have on the business community, why it's important for us to note that quality of life framework?
I'm not sure if everybody knows, but there is a growing recognition internationally that economic growth is only one dimension of what makes a good quality of life. It's about our health, mental health, our homes, social connections, access to the outdoors, even the quality of the food we eat. And governments need to take all of that into account when we make decisions. So we're making time to focus on the holistic well-being of Canadians. And we also know that we need better data to better incorporate quality of life measurements into decision-making and budgeting, similar to international approaches such as in New Zealand and Scotland. And this budget provides $7.7 million over 5 years and a $1.6 million ongoing to enable Statistics Canada to improve quality of life measures and address key data gaps. And I've also led the creation of this framework, a Made in Canada quality of life framework, so that we can see how the country is doing a well-being standpoint and use this information to make better policy and funding decisions. And this will allow us to focus on what matters most to Canadians: prosperity, health, environment, social cohesion, and good governance. So we will continue to work with this tool as we have to continue to go beyond GDP and make those decisions that will really support Canadians across the country and even businesses.
So your government has made many announcements in the province regarding the investment in transit infrastructure. So could you give us a bit of an overview of your financial support here locally for the Durham region?
Well, I'm sure that Ryan might want to respond to that too, if he wants to after me. But as you know, public transit is at the heart of a clean, inclusive recovery that restarts our economy and creates good jobs. So since 2015, our government has invested over $62 million towards 23 public transit projects in the Durham region. And this includes 23 million for the design and constructions of BRT lanes in Whitby, Ajax, and Oshawa. And in February, we announced the creation of a permanent public transit fund of $3 billion per year, beginning in 2026. And over the coming months, Infrastructure Canada will work with the provinces and territories, municipal governments, and Indigenous communities to develop the program in a way that offers the greatest benefits to Canadians, including those here in Whitby. And I might want to give a chance for Ryan if he wants to answer that question, as he's the one representing you in Whitby.
Thanks, Mona. Yeah, it's really great. The infrastructure investments that are rolling out and being announced are really sizable, and I think are going to make a real difference in our community. Certainly the one that seems many months ago now, but the project is still being worked out, is the bus rapid transit route, which will connect all of Durham region down its Highway 2 Kingston Road corridor. And I think that's a really big one. It also connects with all the active transportation routes, and there's been considerable investment by our government in numerous active transportation routes in Whitby, which is great. We've also had really great announcements in local, the Civic Recreation Center upgrades, and EV chargers across Durham region. There's a lot. There's actually too much for me to cover in the short time that we have, but I'll turn it back over to Natalie, and I look forward to the next question.
Thank you. It's actually the last one. So many programs and funding opportunities were announced in the budget. When will we receive more details so that the business community can plan to leverage these opportunities? So maybe from a timing perspective, how does the business community learn more?
Well, that's a very good question, of course. And, you know, different programs will have different timelines to get set up. And many of the details have already been made public in the Budget Implementation Act. For example, we're proposing to introduce the new Canada Recovery Hiring Program for eligible employers that continue to experience qualifying declines in revenues relative to before the pandemic. And the proposed subsidy would offset a portion of the extra costs employers take on as they reopen, either by increasing wages or hours worked, like I said earlier, or even hiring more staff. And this support would only be available for active employees and will be available from June 6th to November 20th of this year, 2021. And eligible employers would claim the higher of the Canada Emergency Wage Subsidy or the new proposed subsidy. Now, the aim is to make it as easy as possible for businesses to hire new workers, you know, as we roll out the next steps. And another thing I wanted to add, and maybe Ryan, you'll be able to answer that question also, is the fact that we know tourism sector was really hit hard, and many other businesses, restaurants, arts and culture, as I said earlier. And we'll have to be working with our economic regional development, which is FedDev. They have also received a lot of funds, especially for tourism. I think it's over $500 million to support businesses. So there's a stream that might be helpful for you as a business if you're looking for that support through FedDev, or maybe Ryan, you have, I know you will be listening to your businesses and helping guide them the right way. But I also know that, as I said earlier, we have many departments that will be supporting businesses as we go on. Did you want to add something, Ryan? But you're on mute. I can read your lips though.
Sorry, I
you
got
go.
stuck on mute for a second. Famous last words.
Yeah.
Thank you for the opportunity to just say a few words here on this particular point. I would just say, as a previous small business owner and someone who advised small businesses, I've tried to stay in regular touch with many of the small businesses, including our chamber and the BIAs, et cetera. And, you know, there's many stakeholders to talk to, but I think as these programs are completed in terms of their design, and I know it takes a bit of time to roll these sizable programs out, we will certainly keep the chamber apprised of all the details and get information out to you as soon as possible. And we do regular newsletters every week, the community update from my office. So many of the small businesses that are out there, their owners are on that list, and we'll continue to send those email blasts out with all of the most current links and information as things get finalized. I know a lot of this depends on the budget implementation bill getting passed, which is something that we're doing in the next 5 weeks or so, or even less, and hoping to get that speedy passage through the House of Commons so we can move forward with all of these incredible supports that we've planned. And in terms of the hardest hit industries, if there are thoughts, concerns, more that we can do in those areas to inform the support packages coming through FedDev, we would be happy to relay any input you have, Natalie, or any of the small businesses out there. And we know you're holding on by a thread in many of those hardest hit industries. So I've studied the statistics and I really empathize. So we'll do what we can to ensure that the supports are relevant and really do help you on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you both for making the time to speak with us today. I'm hopeful that with our ongoing diligence, commitment to safe business practices, our passion or innovation, thinking creatively, that we're going to move into the summer months with some much needed prosperity. So thank you both again, and have a great afternoon.
Well, thank you. And again, I hope everybody's going to go and get their vaccine and continue, of course, the public health guidelines, but we're getting there. And Nathalie, thank you for your hard work. And Ryan, will continue working together to make sure that we provide services for our business in Whitby and all over the province. So thank you very much.
Thank you, everybody. Thanks, Minister, for being here, and Natalie for all your hard work, and your whole team. I have to say, at the Chamber, you're fantastic people, always leading with your hearts and really doing what's best for our business community, and really appreciate that. So all the best to everybody. Stay hopeful. We'll get through this together.